Imagine the lights of Hollywood flashing, the red carpets rolled out, and the cameras always searching for a glimpse of the man who has defined blockbuster cinema for over 4 decades. Tom Cruise, an actor, a producer, a daredevil who clings to airplanes mid-flight for a scene, who runs across rooftops, who has given audiences some of the most thrilling spectacles in film history. His career is a story that almost every moviegoer knows. But behind the scenes, behind the charming smile and the discipline of a consummate professional, lies another story, a quieter, more personal one. It is the story of Tom Cruise's heart. He's had many loves, and the world has watched as his relationships played out in headlines, in interviews, and on those same red carpets. And yet, across decades, across marriages and breakups, there remains a question that fans still ask: who was the true love of Tom Cruise's life? After all, the man who has built an image around action, secrecy, and larger-than-life performances has also given glimpses, just glimpses, of a softer side. He has spoken of women who shaped him, who gave him stability, who inspired his deepest passion. He has smiled when her name came up, or hesitated when talking about a chapter that clearly left a mark. Some of his words have been playful, others full of emotion, and sometimes his actions, grand, dramatic, and unforgettable, spoke louder than anything he ever said in an interview. But did he ever admit, even quietly, who the love of his life truly was? That's the journey we are taking today. This isn't about gossip or empty speculation. This is about going through the timeline of his relationships, the words that came from his own mouth, the moments that reveal more than any tabloid headline ever could. From the marriage that first launched him into a new life, to the partner who walked with him through the height of his fame, to the woman who inspired one of his most passionate public declarations, and finally, to the mother of his child, each chapter of Tom Cruise's personal life has left a footprint. And somewhere in these stories lies the answer. Was it the woman who introduced him to a belief system that would change the course of his life? Was it the Australian star with whom he built a home and family during the peak of his career? Was it the Spanish actress he once described in words that sounded almost like poetry? Or was it the young actress who captured his heart so fiercely that he declared his love in front of the entire world, on one of television's most famous stages? For decades, fans, journalists, and even his colleagues have wondered. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, with real interviews, confirmed quotes, and the testimonies of those who knew him, we can piece together the answer. This isn't about rumor, it's about reality. It's about what he really said, how he really felt, and the lasting impact these women had on the man behind the legend. So stay with us, because as we journey through Tom Cruise's loves, triumphs, and heartbreaks, we may finally uncover the truth of who he called, if not in words, then through actions, the love of his life. Tom Cruise was born Thomas Cruise Mapotha IV on July 3, 1962, in Syracuse, New York, into a family that would shape much of the determination and resilience he later carried into Hollywood. His childhood was not easy. His father, an electrical engineer, was often described by Tom himself as a bully, while his mother, Mary Lee, worked multiple jobs to support her children. Money was scarce, and the family moved frequently, sometimes living on the edge of poverty. Cruise struggled in school as well. He was diagnosed with dyslexia at a young age, which made academics difficult and left him feeling different from his peers. Yet even in those early years, there were two things that defined him: an ability to dream beyond his circumstances, and a capacity to throw himself fully, passionately, into whatever captured his heart. As a teenager, Cruise briefly considered the priesthood, even enrolling in a Franciscan seminary for a short time. But soon, acting took over. In school plays, he found not only confidence but also a way to channel his intensity. Teachers and classmates remembered him as someone who transformed the moment he was on stage, suddenly coming alive in ways he never did in the classroom. That all-or-nothing quality, the ability to dive completely into a role, would later become a hallmark of his film career. It also mirrored the way he approached love, completely, deeply, without hesitation. While details of Cruise's early relationships are sparse, what emerges from accounts of his youth is a young man who was never afraid to express affection. Friends recall that he was the kind of boy who wore his heart on his sleeve, who would fall hard and fast, often seeing romance through the same lens he saw acting, something larger than life, something that had to be felt fully. Those early crushes, whether fleeting or short-lived, were described as earnest and intense, the beginning of a lifelong pattern in which Cruz loved with passion and urgency. By the late 1970s, Cruz had set his sights on acting seriously, moving to New York City with little more than determination and a few dollars in his pocket. He worked odd jobs, auditioned relentlessly, and lived the life of a struggling young actor. It was during this time that he also began to experience his first serious romances as a young man in the city, though few details have ever been made public. Still, those who knew him at the time say that even then, he had an unmistakable way of making the women in his life feel as though they were central to his world. This was the foundation upon which both his career and his personal life would be built, an intensity that carried through every role he played and every relationship he pursued. From the very beginning, Tom Cruise was not someone who did things halfway. He was a man who gave all of himself, whether to a character on screen or to someone he loved. And as he began his rise in Hollywood, with bit parts that would soon lead to stardom, that same intensity would draw people to him, setting the stage for a series of romances that would fascinate the public for decades. In the mid-1980s, as Tom Cruise's career was taking off with hits like Risky Business and Top Gun, his personal life was also stepping into a new chapter. It was during this time that he crossed paths with Mimi Rogers, an actress 6 years his senior, already established in Hollywood. Mimi was intelligent, ambitious, and well-connected, and she brought a sense of maturity to the whirlwind life of a young star who was just beginning to understand the pressures of fame. They met through mutual circles in Los Angeles, and their connection quickly grew into something deeper. In May 1987, the two were married, marking Cruise's first major commitment in love and life. Mimi Rogers was more than just a partner, she was a pivotal influence on Tom's personal and spiritual journey. It was through Mimi that Cruise was introduced to the Church of Scientology, an organization that would go on to define much of his public identity and personal philosophy. At the time, Mimi was deeply involved in the church, and her guidance led Tom to explore it seriously. For a man who had grown up with instability and who often searched for structure and belonging, Scientology offered a framework of discipline and purpose. Mimi's role in bringing him into this world was transformative not just for their marriage, but for the trajectory of his entire life. Their union, however, was not destined to last. Despite the stability Mimi offered and the spiritual doorway she opened, their marriage ended in 1990 after just 3 years. There were rumors that Cruise's intense dedication to his career and growing involvement with Scientology created strain. Some reports also suggested differences in what they each wanted out of life. While the exact reasons have remained private, the split was relatively quiet compared to the media frenzy that would follow his later relationships. In the years after their divorce, Cruise rarely spoke about Mimi publicly. Unlike with Nicole Kidman or Katie Holmes, he did not give lengthy interviews reminiscing about their time together. Still, there has been no bitterness in the few comments attributed to him. In fact, Mimi herself once remarked in interviews that their marriage simply didn't work out, and she moved forward without public resentment. Cruise, for his part, acknowledged her significance indirectly, if not through romantic reflection, then through the lasting influence she had on his life by introducing him to Scientology. Looking back, Mimi Rogers was the woman who set many things in motion for Tom Cruise. She was there at the cusp of his superstardom, the one who gave him his first experience of marriage, and the person who introduced him to a belief system that would define much of his public image. Though their relationship was brief, its impact was profound, and it became the first chapter in a very public saga of love, loss, and reinvention for one of Hollywood's most enigmatic stars. When Tom Cruise met Nicole Kidman on the set of Days of Thunder in 1990, it was as if Hollywood itself had staged the encounter. Cruise was already one of the most bankable young stars in the world, his name tied to adrenaline-fueled blockbusters, while Kidman was a rising Australian actress whose striking beauty and raw talent were beginning to earn attention. Their chemistry was immediate and undeniable, both on screen and off. Within the year, the pair were married on Christmas Eve in Telluride, Colorado. To the public, it was the perfect match, two dazzling stars, deeply in love, starting what appeared to be a fairy tale romance. Their marriage quickly became one of Hollywood's most watched unions. Together, they adopted 2 children, Isabella and Connor, and created what seemed to be a loving family away from the glare of the cameras. For much of the 1990s, Cruise and Kidman were the embodiment of star power, glamorous, talented, and fiercely supportive of each other. What made their relationship so captivating was not only their public appearances hand in hand at premieres, arm in arm on red carpets, but also the way Tom himself spoke about Nicole. In a 1994 Vanity Fair interview, Cruz described the moment he knew Nicole was the one. "I just knew, I absolutely knew I wanted to marry her," he said, reflecting on the early days of their romance. That sense of certainty, that conviction, was rare for a man living under the constant scrutiny of fame. He painted her not only as his partner but also as someone who gave him a sense of home and belonging. For a man who had grown up in turbulence and had already gone through one short-lived marriage, this was no small admission. Nicole was not just a glamorous companion, she was his confidant, his friend, his anchor. Their partnership extended onto the screen as well. In 1999, they starred together in Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, a haunting exploration of intimacy, desire, and trust. The film became infamous for its length, its enigmatic tone, and its explicitness, but what truly intrigued audiences was the fact that the couple at the center of the story were also a couple in real life. For many, the blurred lines between their roles and their marriage gave the film an added layer of intensity. Critics dissected every gesture, every glance, wondering if art was imitating life or if life was being revealed through art. Through the decade, Tom and Nicole seemed inseparable. They were often photographed smiling together, attending award shows, or simply walking through airports with their children. In an industry where relationships frequently falter under pressure, their marriage appeared strong. Nicole herself often praised Tom's energy and devotion, speaking of the way he supported her career as much as she supported his. Together, they were not just stars but a power couple, admired for balancing love and fame. Yet by the early 2000s, cracks began to show. In 2001, after more than a decade together, Cruz filed for divorce. The announcement shocked fans and the media alike. The reason for the split was never made entirely clear. Speculation swirled around everything from their personal differences to Cruz's growing involvement in Scientology. Both actors kept the details private, but the pain was evident. Nicole later described the divorce as a shock to her system, a heartbreak that left her reeling. Despite the breakup, the way Cruz spoke about Nicole in those years left traces of enduring affection. He didn't dwell on bitterness in public. Instead, he acknowledged the significance of their marriage in shaping who he was, particularly as a father. For Nicole, the pain was deeper, but even she admitted in later interviews that their years together had been formative and meaningful. "He was huge," she once said, describing the magnitude of their relationship in her life. Looking back, Tom and Nicole's marriage remains one of the most significant chapters in his personal story. It was a relationship filled with passion, creativity, and devotion, a union that produced not only a family but also moments in cinema history that continue to be remembered. For fans, it is also the relationship that seemed closest to the idea of true love, a connection so powerful that decades later, many still wonder if Nicole Kidman was, in fact, the great love of Tom Cruise's life. When Tom Cruise's marriage to Nicole Kidman ended in 2001, it left a void not just in his personal life but also in the public imagination. Fans had seen him deeply invested in that relationship for more than a decade, and the question immediately arose: who could possibly follow Nicole Kidman? The answer came quickly, and it was one that made headlines around the world. On the set of Vanilla Sky in 2000, Cruz met Penelope Cruz, the Spanish actress who was already being celebrated for her beauty, charm, and fast-rising Hollywood career. By the time the film premiered in late 2001, the two had become a couple, and a new chapter in Cruz's romantic journey had begun. From the beginning, Cruz spoke about Penelope with a passion that was hard to ignore. In interviews, he didn't hold back from praising her elegance and spirit. He once described her as graceful, warm, and deeply romantic, qualities that reminded him of old Hollywood icons like Audrey Hepburn. He spoke of her not just as a partner but as someone who had a rare ability to invite people in, both as an actress and as a human being. And then there was the moment often quoted from that period: "My God, I'm your boyfriend," he reportedly told her with boyish excitement, as though he couldn't quite believe his own luck. That mix of admiration and awe painted a picture of a man truly smitten, experiencing love again after heartbreak. Their romance was a whirlwind. Unlike the marriage to Nicole, which had been marked by a balance of public and private life, Cruz's relationship seemed more overtly romantic, almost cinematic in itself. The couple was photographed on vacations in Europe, walking through airports hand in hand, and attending glamorous premieres side by side. There was a sense of intensity between them that resonated in their body language, close, affectionate, and often inseparable in public appearances. It was a love affair that combined Hollywood glitz with a palpable sincerity, and the press couldn't get enough of it. Yet even in their openness, the relationship had layers of privacy. Cruz was known for being thoughtful and measured in interviews, and while she occasionally praised Tom, she rarely indulged in oversharing. What mattered was what the cameras caught: the stolen looks, the laughter, the way Cruz seemed to light up around her. For someone whose life was constantly under the microscope, he seemed relaxed and genuinely happy during those years. Their time together lasted about 3 years, from 2001 until 2004, and during that time Cruz became a significant part of Cruz's life. But as their careers demanded more from them, the relationship began to face strain. Both were international stars, often filming on opposite sides of the world. By 2004, the couple decided to part ways. Reports at the time suggested that the breakup was amicable, the result of busy schedules rather than conflict. After their split, neither Tom nor Penelope spoke negatively about the other. In fact, Cruz later described their time together as a positive and meaningful period in her life. Cruz, too, refrained from any bitterness. This mutual respect added a layer of dignity to their relationship, setting it apart from the often messy breakups of Hollywood. It may not have lasted, but it carried an intensity that fans still remember. For Tom Cruise, the relationship with Penelope Cruz came at a pivotal moment. It was the fire after heartbreak, a romance that reminded him and the world that he could still love passionately after the collapse of his marriage to Nicole Kidman. And while it ultimately didn't end in marriage or children, it revealed another side of Cruz, the man who, no matter how much his career demanded, still longed for deep connection and was willing to wear his emotions openly when he found it. To this day, many fans believe that Penelope Cruz was one of the rare women who truly captured his heart, even if only for a brief, brilliant chapter. By the mid-2000s, Tom Cruise was already an icon, an actor whose films defined action cinema, a man constantly under the microscope, and someone whose romantic history fascinated the public as much as his career. When he met Katie Holmes, the young actress best known at the time for her role in Dawson's Creek, the story almost seemed scripted by Hollywood itself. Holmes had once famously said in interviews that she grew up with a crush on Tom Cruise, plastering his posters on her bedroom wall like countless other teenagers. To many, it was a fantasy, the young fan who grew up to marry her idol. Their relationship became public in 2005, and it was anything but quiet. Tom and Katie stepped into the spotlight together with a level of openness that startled even seasoned Hollywood watchers. Cruise seemed intoxicated by love, unable to contain his emotions. In May of that year, he appeared on The Oprah Winfrey Show in what became one of the most infamous moments of his career. Unable to restrain his excitement, he leapt onto Oprah's couch, declaring his love for Katie with childlike enthusiasm. It was raw, unscripted, and unforgettable. While the moment sparked endless media parodies, it also made one thing crystal clear: Tom was head over heels in love. The relationship moved quickly. Just months after going public, Tom proposed to Katie at the Eiffel Tower in Paris, a gesture as cinematic as his film roles. In April 2006, the couple welcomed their daughter, Suri Cruz, into the world. Later that year, in November, Tom and Katie were married in a lavish ceremony at a 15th-century castle in Italy, attended by some of the biggest names in Hollywood. For a time, it seemed like Tom had not only found love again but was building the family life he had long sought. During these years, Cruise often spoke of Katie with words full of devotion. He described her as extraordinary, radiant, and someone who had transformed his life. Whenever the couple appeared together on red carpets, he looked at her with unmistakable pride, often holding her close or whispering something that made her laugh. In interviews, he spoke warmly of their daughter Suri, saying that fatherhood with Katie had given him joy unlike anything else. To the public, it felt like Tom had finally found not just a partner but a family that grounded him. But as bright as their romance shone, it also came under heavy scrutiny. The intersection of Cruz's deep involvement with Scientology and his marriage to Katie became a frequent topic of discussion. Some outlets speculated that Katie felt pressured by the demands of Cruz's faith, though she rarely spoke publicly about it. For several years, however, the family presented a united front, photographed strolling through New York City with young Suri or traveling together for premieres. Then, in 2012, the fairytale came to an abrupt and dramatic end. Katie Holmes filed for divorce after 6 years of marriage, reportedly without giving Tom much warning. The news shocked fans and sent tabloids into overdrive. The reasons behind the split were kept private, though many reports suggested that Katie wanted to give Suri a life outside of the structure and influence of Scientology. Tom later admitted in interviews that he was blindsided by her decision, saying he did not see it coming. In the years since their separation, both Tom and Katie have remained largely private about their marriage. Katie focused on raising Suri, who has lived primarily with her mother in New York. Holmes occasionally mentioned how important it was to her to provide a grounded, normal life for her daughter, away from constant media glare. Tom, on the other hand, rarely spoke about the breakup publicly, though he continued to express pride and love for Suri whenever her name came up. Their co-parenting has largely taken place outside the spotlight, with Katie assuming the most visible role in her daughter's upbringing. The marriage of Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes was one of Hollywood's great spectacles, a story of whirlwind romance, over-the-top gestures, and eventually, heartbreak. For some, the image of Tom bouncing on Oprah's couch remains a symbol of his unfiltered passion for Katie, a moment when he showed the world how much he loved her. For others, the sudden end of the marriage reflects the complexity of blending personal lives with the pressures of fame, faith, and media attention. Whatever the interpretation, it was a relationship that revealed both the most public and the most vulnerable sides of Tom Cruise. And though it ended in separation, it left behind the most precious part of their story, Suri, the daughter he once described as a miracle in his life. Rumors have always swirled around Tom Cruise's personal life, often filling the gaps where facts are scarce. Over the decades, the media has linked him to several women beyond his confirmed marriages and relationships, creating a blurred line between what's real and what's speculation. Some of these rumors gained traction, while others quickly faded as little more than gossip. One example in recent years came when Cruise was rumored to be romantically involved with No Time to Die star Ana de Armas after their collaboration was discussed in entertainment outlets. Headlines speculated about chemistry and late-night meetings, but credible sources never confirmed such a relationship. Similar whispers have attached Cruise's name to a string of actresses and models, usually sparked by a photograph, a shared event, or pure speculation without evidence. This is a pattern that has followed him since the early days of his career. For someone as famous and scrutinized as Tom Cruise, even casual interactions can be blown out of proportion. A lunch with a co-star becomes a date, a friendly hug turns into a romance, and an extended collaboration fuels stories of passion behind the scenes. The reality, however, is that the only relationships verified through Cruise's own words and actions are the ones the world already knows: his marriages to Mimi Rogers, Nicole Kidman, and Katie Holmes, and his confirmed relationship with Penelope Cruz. Everything else falls into the category of rumor, persistent, sometimes entertaining, but ultimately unverified. It's also important to highlight what we don't have. Despite decades of interviews, public appearances, and media coverage, there is no record of Tom Cruise ever definitively saying, "She was the love of my life," about any one woman. He has spoken of love, devotion, and admiration for his partners. He has made dramatic, heartfelt gestures, jumping on Oprah's couch for Katie, praising Penelope's grace, reminiscing about the instant connection with Nicole. But never has he singled out one woman in those exact words, leaving room for interpretation and speculation. This absence of a definitive declaration hasn't stopped people from creating their own narratives. Fans and commentators often interpret his behavior as proof of who might have been the one. For some, it was Nicole Kidman, the woman he spent a decade with, raising children and building a life before their painful divorce. For others, it was Katie Holmes, with his public passion and the birth of his biological daughter, Suri, seen as evidence of his deepest bond. Some even argue for Penelope Cruz, whose brief but fiery romance with him seemed to bring out a uniquely open side of his personality. These interpretations reveal more about how we project onto celebrities than about Cruz himself. The public often wants a clean narrative, the great actor with the great love story, the heartbreak, the confession. Media outlets feed this by framing his relationships in sweeping terms, as though every chapter must fit into a single, grand arc of love lost and found. In reality, human relationships are rarely so simple. Cruz's story is not one of a single great love, but rather of several profound, complicated, and sometimes painful relationships, each significant in its own way. The fascination with finding the love of his life also speaks to a broader cultural tendency. We want heroes not just on screen but in life, and part of that story involves romance. When Cruz plays characters who fight for love against impossible odds, audiences want to believe that his real life mirrors those roles. And when he doesn't provide a definitive answer, the void is quickly filled with speculation, rumor, and projection. In the end, what we don't have may be just as telling as what we do. Tom Cruise has never crowned one woman as the definitive love of his life. Instead, his romantic history tells a story of passion, intensity, and complexity, with each chapter adding a layer to his public persona. The lack of a simple answer may frustrate fans, but it also reflects reality. Life and love are rarely summed up in a single sentence, even for a star as famous as Tom Cruise. Throughout his career, Tom Cruise has been famously private about his personal life, but there are key moments, often in interviews, that offer rare glimpses into what his relationships meant to him. When looking for the strongest evidence of who might have been the love of his life, a few moments stand out, moments when his words carried a weight of sincerity that lingered far beyond the interview itself. Perhaps the most compelling example comes from his marriage to Nicole Kidman. In a 2002 Vanity Fair profile reflecting on their time together, Cruz described their relationship in terms that went beyond casual affection. Speaking about their marriage, he explained that when he decided to be with Nicole, there wasn't hesitation. I absolutely knew, I just knew. It was a statement of certainty, a rare admission that his feelings for her weren't gradual or tentative, but immediate and undeniable. For fans, those words have often been cited as the clearest indication of just how deeply Nicole mattered to him. The years with Nicole were also marked by public displays of unity. From adopting their 2 children together to co-starring in the provocative Eyes Wide Shut, Cruz often referred to her as both his partner and his equal. Even after their divorce in 2001, which was followed by long periods of silence between them, there have been moments where Tom's respect for Nicole surfaced again. In recent years, he has made rare but respectful comments about her success, acknowledging her talent and longevity in Hollywood. These small but significant moments have fueled the belief that, out of all his relationships, Nicole left the deepest imprint on his heart. Then there was his time with Penelope Cruz, a romance that carried a different kind of energy. After meeting on the set of Vanilla Sky, Cruz seemed reinvigorated, openly praising Penelope in interviews. He once described her as graceful, romantic, and possessing a beauty that wasn't just physical but soulful. The much-quoted "My God, I'm your boyfriend" remark captured the giddy excitement of a man who had rediscovered passion after heartbreak. Those words, simple but genuine, reflected how deeply enamored he was at the time. The relationship may not have lasted, but the way he spoke about her remains one of the clearest examples of his unguarded affection. Katie Holmes brought yet another chapter, one defined by grand gestures. While he never used the phrase "love of my life," his actions during that period said a great deal. The most famous example was his exuberant Oprah appearance in 2005, where his joy about being with Katie burst out in a way that was impossible to ignore. He spoke frequently about her being extraordinary and about how fatherhood with her had changed him. Though their marriage ended in 2012, those years captured Cruz at his most visibly passionate, and many still see that period as proof of how deeply he loved her. In later interviews, Tom has occasionally reflected on his past relationships, though never in the sensational way tabloids would hope. Instead, his comments have been measured, showing admiration for the women he shared his life with. For example, in a more recent interview highlighted by entertainment outlets, Cruz made a rare comment about Nicole Kidman, acknowledging her achievements and professionalism. While not a confession of enduring love, The fact that he still speaks of her respectfully decades later suggests that their bond left a lasting mark. When viewed together, these moments create a mosaic rather than a single answer. The I just knew about Nicole, the giddy my God, I'm your boyfriend to Penelope, the over-the-top passion with Katie, all of them reveal a man who has loved intensely at different points in his life. What he has confessed is not that one woman was definitively the love of his life, but that in each chapter, his love was real, consuming, and transformative. The strongest evidence doesn't point to a single name but rather to the depth of his capacity for love itself, expressed in unforgettable moments across decades. When trying to answer the question of who might have been the love of Tom Cruise's life, the evidence points in several directions. Each of his most prominent relationships carried weight and meaning, but when we sift through his words, his actions, and the impressions left behind, some contenders stand out more strongly than others. Nicole Kidman emerges as the leading candidate in this regard. Their marriage lasted over a decade, a remarkable span of time in Hollywood terms, and together they adopted 2 children, Isabella and Connor. In interviews, Tom spoke of Nicole with unusual certainty. His Vanity Fair admission, "I absolutely knew, I just knew," when he decided to marry her remains one of his most heartfelt confessions. Beyond the words, there was the life they built together. They navigated fame, film projects, and personal challenges side by side throughout the 1990s. Even after their painful divorce in 2001, Tom has occasionally referred to Nicole with respect, acknowledging her career achievements. The combination of time, family, and unmistakable passion suggests that Nicole may well have been the woman who defined him most deeply in love. Penelope Cruz represents a very different kind of love in Tom's story. Their relationship, though shorter, lasting about 3 years, was marked by intensity and freshness. Coming on the heels of his divorce from Nicole, Penelope represented fire after heartbreak. His public comments about her were filled with awe, her beauty, grace, and romantic nature left him clearly smitten. His playful, almost giddy quote, "My God, I'm your boyfriend," illustrates the depth of his infatuation. For many fans, this was Tom at his most openly romantic, reveling in the sheer thrill of being in love again. While the relationship ended amicably, without lasting bitterness, its shorter duration makes it harder to argue that it carried the same enduring significance as his marriage to Nicole. Still, for a time, Penelope was undeniably central to his happiness. Katie Holmes holds another critical place in Tom's journey, largely because of their daughter, Suri. The early years of their relationship were marked by dramatic, public declarations of love, none more famous than the Oprah couch-jumping moment, when Tom literally couldn't contain his joy. He described Katie as extraordinary, spoke of the joy of fatherhood, and seemed determined to show the world how much she meant to him. Their 2006 marriage in Italy, complete with celebrity guests and worldwide media coverage, had all the makings of a fairy tale. But their split in 2012 shifted the narrative. Katie's focus on raising Suri outside the spotlight, combined with Tom's rare and measured public comments afterward, means that their love story feels less like a lasting bond and more like a whirlwind chapter that ended too soon. Still, the existence of Suri, whom Tom has described as a miracle, cements Katie's importance in his life forever. When comparing the three, Nicole Kidman remains the strongest contender for being the one. Their relationship combined passion, longevity, and family in a way that no other romance of his has quite matched. Penelope Cruz represents passion at its peak, but without the permanence. Katie Holmes represents love expressed in the grandest public gestures, but her later silence and Tom's lack of nostalgic reflection suggest their story is more complicated. If Tom Cruise were ever to name one woman as the love of his life, the weight of evidence points most clearly to Nicole Kidman. Their years together, his certainty in choosing her, and the enduring echoes of respect decades later all hint that she was the person who left the deepest mark. Still, what makes this question so intriguing is that Tom himself has never declared it outright, leaving fans to piece together the puzzle from fragments of words, actions, and memories. And perhaps that mystery is part of why his love life continues to fascinate us. It reflects the universal truth that love, in all its forms, is rarely simple, and often leaves us wondering what might have been. For a figure as public as Tom Cruise, every word, every gesture, and every relationship has been scrutinized by the world. Against that backdrop, it makes sense why he might wait decades before ever making a statement as vulnerable as, "She was the love of my life." His public image has always been carefully balanced between the action hero persona on screen and the enigmatic figure off it. Declaring one person as his greatest love is not just a personal admission, it would instantly become global news, dissected endlessly, with consequences for how people view not only his past relationships but also his future. Cruz's career priorities also help explain his guardedness. Since the 1980s, his life has revolved around filmmaking. Few stars have worked as consistently or as intensely, taking on projects that demand years of dedication. Love stories and heartbreak may shape a man's inner life, but Cruz's outer life has often been consumed by his devotion to work. Revealing deep feelings risks shifting the spotlight away from his professional achievements and toward the gossip that has always chased him. For someone so fiercely protective of his craft, that distraction could feel like a loss of control. Then there are the complicating factors of religion and media. Scientology has been central to Cruz's life since his marriage to Mimi Rogers, and his faith has been both a source of strength and a source of controversy. Discussions of his marriages, particularly with Nicole Kidman and Katie Holmes, have often been entangled with questions about Scientology's influence. In such an environment, making a definitive romantic confession could easily become distorted, with headlines focusing less on love and more on the church's role in his choices. Add to that decades of tabloid coverage, from rumors about his sexuality to constant speculation about who he might be dating, and it's clear why absolute statements about love could feel dangerous. Divorce, too, plays a role. Cruz has endured 3 high-profile splits, each one covered relentlessly in the press. With each breakup, speculation about fault, heartbreak, and hidden truths filled magazines and talk shows. For someone who has seen private pain turned into public spectacle, declaring one woman as the love of his life might reopen wounds, inviting comparisons and judgments that would affect not only him but also the women involved. And yet, time changes perspective. As people grow older, they often reflect on their past with a new clarity. Feelings once too raw to articulate can become easier to express after distance and healing. What seemed complicated in the moment can, with maturity, be remembered simply as love. If Tom Cruise were ever to confess decades later that one woman was the great love of his life, it wouldn't necessarily diminish his other relationships. Instead, it would serve as a testament to how time distills our memories, sharpening what mattered most. In that light, his silence so far doesn't mean he has never felt such love, it may only mean he hasn't been ready to share it with the world. For someone who has lived under the magnifying glass for so long, choosing the right moment, later in life, might be the only way to make such a confession truly his own. Tom Cruise's love life has always been a subject of fascination, partly because of the sheer magnitude of his fame, and partly because of the way he has lived so much of it under the world's gaze. Across the decades, we've seen him fall in love, marry, divorce, and start again. Some of those relationships lasted years, others only a few, but each one left behind glimpses of a man who loved intensely, even if he rarely spoke about it in detail. What we do know is clear. Cruz has had 3 marriages, Mimi Rogers, Nicole Kidman, and Katie Holmes, and one confirmed long-term relationship with Penelope Cruz. We also know that he has, at times, spoken with genuine passion and certainty about those women. His "I absolutely knew, I just knew" comment about Nicole Kidman remains one of the strongest declarations he has ever made. His giddy remarks about Penelope Cruz, calling her beautiful, graceful, and romantic, showed a man openly enchanted. His exuberance with Katie Holmes, most famously his unforgettable Oprah appearance, gave the world a glimpse of his love expressed in action rather than words. What remains in the realm of speculation are the rumors, brief links to other stars, unconfirmed whispers, and the fan-driven theories about who might have been the one. Importantly, there has never been a verifiable, public record of Tom Cruise saying, "She was the love of my life," about any woman. That absence leaves us piecing together meaning from his actions, his rare quotes, and the way he behaved when he was happiest in love. So, what conclusion can we draw? If Cruise ever were to utter those words, the weight of evidence suggests he would most likely be speaking of Nicole Kidman. Their long marriage, adopted children, and his definitive words about knowing she was the one to marry make her the strongest candidate. Penelope Cruz stands as a close second. Her relationship with Tom was shorter, but marked by a fire and openness that seemed to revive him after heartbreak. Katie Holmes also holds a profound place in his story, especially because of their daughter Suri, though the lack of nostalgic reflection from Tom suggests their love, while real and passionate, is not the one he'd define as everlasting. But maybe that's the bigger truth. Perhaps love doesn't always need the exact words. Sometimes, it's in the way someone looks at their partner, the way they speak with certainty, or the way they protect their memories long after the relationship ends. For Tom Cruise, those moments exist across more than one chapter, which may be why we're still searching for an answer. So now we turn it to you. Who do you believe was the love of Tom Cruise's life? Was it Nicole, the partner of a decade? Penelope, who reignited his heart? Katie, the mother of his child? Or someone else entirely? Let us know in the comments, because sometimes, the greatest love story isn't the one told outright, but the one we piece together from what's left unsaid.